You know what time it is. It's time to hang out with Mr. Coop. With Mr. Cooper, with Mr. Cooper, with Mr. Cooper. Get the latest scoop from Mr. Cooper, from Mr. Cooper, from Mr. Cooper. Hang with Mr. Coop, with Mr. Cooper, with Mr. Cooper, with Mr. Cooper. Get the latest scoop from Mr. Cooper, from Mr. Cooper. Yeah.
Welcome to the Bit Scoop with Coop. I'm your host, Coop. Season 9 still going strong, people. If you haven't, make sure you go to the bitscoopwithcoop.com to catch episodes from Season 1 all the way up to now. Big shout outs to everybody that's watching on Facebook. Facebook.com/The Big Scoop with Coop. Also, big shout outs to everybody that's watching on Instagram, IGTV, baby, at Big Scoop with Coop. Also, make sure you follow me on YouTube. Go to youtube.com, click on the Bit Scoop with Coop. Make sure you click like and subscribe so you don't miss one episode of the show. All right, people, enough about me. Today's guests, oh man, both of these people have been doing big things in their own industries, so they came together to make an awesome podcast. I have Mr. Fritz Coleman and Mr. Louise Palanker. These two have been doing big things. I mean big things in their career. One has been a comedian and turned into a weather reporter. Also, the other one's been working in the radio entertainment industry for a while. Now, I will let you know, they have a show that's out that is called Media Path Podcast. Make sure you do go check that out on YouTube. All right, people, well, enough talking. Let's go on and check out the show. We're going to catch up with Fritz. We're going to catch up with Louise, and let's see what's going on. All right, people. Mr. Coleman, Ms. Palanker, how are you all doing today?
We're doing great, Coop. Thanks for inviting us on.
Yes. Thank you for having us.
Of course, of course. So how's both of y'all days going right now?
Pretty good.
Great.
I just got the AC fixed in my house, and
I told them it was 110 degrees out here. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy hot this week. It's supposed to break this Friday, so we're making do.
That's good. So I'm gonna brag a little bit. I'm in North Carolina, so the weather right now is probably in its early 80s.
Yeah.
So it's not hot enough to fry eggs on the ground or cook breakfast on the ground like you guys can do right now. So
I like how you call it the early 80s. It's like, going to get ready to move to Florida at some point.
So true. So true. But I think I'm gonna stay right here in North Carolina for a while.
Yeah.
And that weather's getting ridiculous everywhere you go almost. Yes.
Yeah.
It is. Now, just in case for everyone that's been around the world, if you've been living under a rock and you don't know who these two are, we're going to start from the beginning. I want to start with Fritz first. Mr. Coleman, when did you first realize that you wanted to become a weather reporter for KNBC and NBC LA?
Well, it was actually an accident, Coop. I came out to Los Angeles, where I am now, in 1980 to pursue a career in stand-up comedy. I had been doing it for a while throughout New York State and around, and got bitten by the bug and came out here. And I was performing at the Comedy Store in Los Angeles, which was the big mecca for stand-up comics. And I happened to be working in 1982, and the news director from Channel 4 in Los Angeles was in the audience.
Wow.
And I talked on stage about having done the weather when I worked for Armed Forces Radio and Television in the Navy. And I was forced to do the weather in the Navy, but didn't know anything about it. He thought that was very amusing. So he said, this is an odd question, but I know you're a comic and everything. Do you have any desire to come to work at Channel 4 and do some vacation and weekend fill-in work for me? And I was making $45 a night at the Comedy Store. I said, wow. When do you want me to start? He said, well, you have to audition. So I auditioned, and the next week I was given the job. And for 2 years, I did the utility player, the weekend filling guy. And then I was bumped up to the main job and just retired 2 years ago after a 40-year career at Channel 4 in Los Angeles. The greatest stroke of luck in show business. So I came out to do comedy. I continue to do comedy, but I was fortunate enough to have a stable weather job so I could raise my 3 kids and not have to go on the road and stuff.
Wow.
Crazy.
Yes. Yep. And you see, that's the thing. I believe you call it a stroke of luck. Me, I call it, that's actually fate hitting at the right time. You're on stage You never know who's gonna be in the crowd.
I'll
whenever you
take your
perform.
word for it. No, I know it. And it was just it was a grand accident. And the older I get, the luckier I understand I have been. So it was pretty cool.
Yes, yes, ladies and gentlemen worldwide, I will just tell it to you right now. Whatever you're doing in life, it doesn't matter what you're doing. You always do it 100% because you don't know who's watching.
Yep.
Anytime someone can jump up and like what you're doing, and you never know, the opportunity of a lifetime can be right there in front of your face, and you think it's just another ordinary person. Me personally, I call everybody almost ordinary, but at the same time, you never know what connections a person have to get you to.
It's so funny. It's so funny. You're so right. And I'll tell you why. I'm always invited to go speak at colleges and stuff and sort of describe my experience.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing I can offer is, because I'm not a trained weatherman, I was a comic, and they hired me for my personality. I said, the only thing I can bring to the table, the only thing I can recommend to you is exactly what you just said, is don't be afraid to take a chance at something you hadn't planned on. So this opportunity presented itself, and the only thing I brought to the table was the guts to say, okay, I hadn't thought about that, but that's a cool thing. And if I failed at it, that would have been fine. But I at least tried it, and it turned out to be a spectacular career. So what you say is true.
That's what
Life is about being prepared when that key person looks in your direction.
No, that's precisely right.
That is so deep, and I like that, Miss Louise. You're right about that. Now, Louise, I want to get on you real quick because you've been doing big things. We're going to talk about Media Path Podcast in a minute, because you two are doing big things also in the podcast world also. But before these days of the podcast, you actually was doing radio entertainment. You was in the radio industry.
Yes.
How did you get started into that?
I just spent my whole life being prepared for podcasting, getting myself ready. I'm like, I know it's coming. There's got to be something more. I kind of grew up in Buffalo, New York, and I didn't know anybody in show business, but I didn't even know how to say it out loud. You know, how you have these aspirations, you don't say it out loud because you don't want to get laughed at, or someone say, oh, that doesn't happen, or that's not possible. So I went and got my teaching degree. So, and it's not like I consider it something to fall back on, because I've always mentored kids, and I just love, I think we're all educators. If you're interested in somebody, just lock eyes and listen to their story and give them like a piece of wisdom, because we're all teachers, right?
Yes.
So I continue to mentor kids, and then they become young people, and, I continue to mentor. And that's like a really rewarding piece of my life. But I did go out to California, try to figure out how to get into show business, got a job as a page, which is the quintessential entry-level position where you wear a uniform and you seat the studio audiences for the tapings of the TV shows. And then that led to a job on a show called PM Magazine, which was at one point guest hosted by a guy named Rick Dees, who was a big disc jockey in Los Angeles. And he wound up offering me a job writing his countdown show, his new countdown show called the Rick Dees Weekly Top 40, which led to me starting my own radio syndication company with my partners. And then, kind of like working in the trenches on radio shows that were hosted by other people, or on radio programming that local morning guys could have the materials that they needed to do a 4-hour show every morning. And that we called that like morning show prep, and we sent them funny characters, and we, the technology at the time was that we could fax them jokes, but that was the fastest we could get anything to them, because this is all pre-internet, right? And but we would send them reel-to-reel tapes of these funny characters that they would play, and the script to interact with that character. And so that was all my prep work for podcasting, because I was always in the background. But I started doing stand-up, and I thought, one day I'd like to perform. Like here at Premiere, I'm kind of like keeping the train on the tracks here, but I'd like to perform. And so like I said earlier, life is about preparation. Like everything that you do, whether it's your hobby or your job, could be preparing you for that, the next big step you're about to take.
That is so true. And it's kind of funny about this. Not funny, but it is funny. Both of you all were doing something, you and Fritz, and the right person saw you all at the right time. Mm-hmm. And look at what your career has done. I mean, it blossomed, it skyrocketed. You guys both have been doing great things, and I'm letting you know right now, and I'm just saying it right now, both of your careers are nowhere close to being over. Aww. You may have stepped out of one door, but a new door opened up for both of you, and look at what you're doing now, Media Path. It's crazy. It's really crazy. Yeah. Now, yes. Now let me ask you, sir.
You want to be our agent, Coop?
Don't tempt me.
You got
Don't tempt me.
you got the pitch, my friend.
I would do it. Yes. Now, Fritz and Miss Louise, did you all have any mentors helping you all out when you all first started in both of your paths before you got the media path?
Weezy?
I kind of don't feel like I had a mentor. I mean, my mentor has been Henry Winkler for the past maybe 30 years. But when I was a kid, I don't feel like I think I had a lot of detractors. You know, my dad was always a mentor, you know, but that's my dad. I was blessed to have my dad. But my first jobs were really difficult, and they were for people that were very abusive. And you have to be, I mean, you've got to have a friend that you can call and cry to, because sometimes you just need to cry. I mean, it can be, when you enter a business that a lot of different people want to be in, as competitive business, there's a lot of people that are going to just break you, try to break you. And it's not because they're purposely trying to break you. It's just because they're too involved in their own pain to recognize that they're harming you. And yeah, so I don't know. What about you, Fritz?
Well, I guess I had sort of mentors at a distance. So people mentored me, but they didn't realize they were doing it. It wasn't a one-on-one interaction. But when you're a stand-up comic, it's a very solitary pursuit. You're all alone. You do the writing yourself. You come up with a frame of mind yourself and the point of view yourself. So I learned from other performers. I would say that Carson was a mentor, Johnny Carson, because it just taught me how to appeal to people's mid-American sensibilities. I looked up to David Letterman because of his fast wit and his attitude. But I didn't have entertainment is interesting, at least for comics, because you don't. Comics aren't the kind of guys that you know, sort of mentor you along, because they're so jealous. And as soon as you start doing better than they do, they hate it. So it's a different mentoring environment. So I took sort of silent tips from people who I looked up to, and it was that type of thing. So Carson, David Letterman, Bob Hope was a big mentor. I don't know if your audience is,
of course,
old enough to appreciate who that was, but
I hope they do.
You know, but I never really had an active guy who, and I see what your question is, took me under his wing and sort of led me along. In this business, you sort of have to box on your own and find your own path, which is interesting.
It's so true. So true. Now, it's funny that you said, Fritz, about finding your own path. And this question is to you and Miss Louise, both of you. What type of hurdles did both of you all go through to get to where you all are today for Media Path, from the beginning of your career all the way up to now?
Weezy?
I don't think I realized until the Me Too movement happened how much of the adversity that I had faced was, and I mean, it wasn't any kind of, it wasn't anything that was illegal. It wasn't anything sexual. It was just being treated in a certain type of way because you're a woman, being excluded from like people attempting to, you know, remove me from any kind of position of power, like rearrange the way the deck was looking. Whereas I had a piece of Premier Radio, and I had partners that were trying to box me out of that and get me to take a buyout, and they wanted me to still work there, but they wanted me to take a buyout, and so clearly they still needed what I was doing, but they didn't feel there was like something in their DNA that didn't feel like a woman should have this much of a position of ownership. And I guess I didn't see it as being kind of based on my gender until Me Too. And then it caused me to look back on things that I just kind of faced and I kind of dealt with. You know, I got a lawyer, I protected my rights, but I think it is trickier for young women, even if they're not working in like a typically male environment. I just think that stuff happens where it's like subconscious sometimes that men treat women in a type of way, like they'd be more comfortable if you were kind of over there. Like, could you just be over there? Like, we really like you, but we're going to need for you to be over there. And it's like, no, I think I'm right here. I think that's what I earned, you know,
So
and that's what I would advise young people.
Mhm. What about you,
Uh,
Fritz?
I think all the speed bumps I hit were just competitive speed bumps. When I came out here in 1980, it was sort of the peak of a big comedy wave where there were as many comedy clubs in towns as there were Starbucks at one point,
Hmm.
and the competition was unbelievable. And you have to decide early on whether you have the intestinal fortitude to tough it out and compete against some of the best people in the business at the Comedy Store, and say to yourself, can I do this? And be very honest with yourself. So your competition is with the other comedians, and then your competition is with yourself. So those are the hurdles that I had to uh, uh, jump over. That was being as good or better than the other 900 guys who were in town vying for spots, and then looking at myself and saying, where can I take this with the amount of talent I've been given? So I would say generally competition, both with myself and with the business.
Okay.
Those are speed bumps.
Yes. Now I want to speak on both of your situations. Fritz, I want to start with yours first. The 80s was you're right, it was a very strong decade, far as goes for comedians. A few years ago, or a few seasons ago, I had comedian Rich Snyder on the show. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him or not.
Rich Scheidner.
Scheidner. I keep calling him Snyder.
Years.
Jesus.
Yeah. No, that's it's a very odd name, and I'm glad you brought him up because he's brilliant. Not only a great stand-up, but a great writer. And he wrote and produced the Blue Collar Comedy Show on independent television. He's a great guy. Yes. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. I'm glad you corrected me because for some reason for years I keep saying Snyder. I try to get it out of my mouth.
It's all right. We knew who you were talking about.
It's good. Now I know he was talking about, far as it goes, for the competitiveness that was in the 80s. Because if you look back at the comedians of the 80s, the ones that are well known and not well known, the 80s was the go-to spot, far as it goes, for finding comedy in different levels. So yes, I agree with you on that. That is like you're putting yourself in a large pond with a lot of big fish.
No, that's exactly it. And things began to change in the 80s, both for the better and for the worse for comics. There were so many of them. But then the arrival of cable television changed everything. Yes. And they were doing stand-up on cable. And one of the first shows that caused breakout careers was Def Comedy Jam on HBO. It was a great venue for African-American comics to get seen. And, you had Chris Rock and all these guys that exploded out of there, Eddie Murphy. So cable changed everything, because instead of all these comics vying for a 5-minute spot on the Johnny Carson show or on the David Letterman show, and may or may not get discovered out of that venue, they gave these guys a half hour or an hour to show their act and really present. And so that was, the 80s was great. It was very competitive, but it also introduced guys to a wider audience through cable, which was kind of groundbreaking and that kind of cool.
I agree with you on that. I agree because a lot of these comedians, they actually got turned to television shows. Think about it. Bill Cosby with the Cosby Show. I'm gonna go back further before the 80s. Red Fox. Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of different. I can keep naming different shows that came out with comedians. We will run out of time if I do it. But yes, I guess you guys get my drift. There's a lot of things that was going on. And Fritz, I feel sorry for you. I'm not gonna lie to you. I do, because I wouldn't want to be a comedian in the 80s to go against all of you. To be truthful, I might as well do jokes at the family reunion and just keep it at that, because there's too many of y'all.
Well, you know what? That's interesting that you say that. The one thing you have to do, because it's a crowded field with a lot of talented people, is you have to be honest with yourself and say, okay, I'm not going to be Dave Chappelle. I'm not going to be Chris Rock.
That's right.
I'm not going to be George Carlin. What do I have the potential to be? So you have to find your strengths and play to them, and then just enjoy your performance experience. That's the point. I've reached a point in my life where I just enjoy that hour that I'm on stage, and feel like I'm providing a service to people. And you get into trouble when you really compare yourself to other people.
Yeah.
A comedian by the name of Johnny Dark, who was a very close friend of David Letterman's, and he's all over television, said something really interesting to me. He said, one of the hardest things to get used to in show business is to be able to deal with the success of your friends. And I thought that was brilliant because, you know, he was friends with Leno and David Letterman, and he's watching these guys get these huge TV shows and become enormously successful. And that same path didn't happen for him. And you need to be able to deal with that emotionally. So as soon as you find your own strength and your own voice and just do as well as you can do with the tools you're given, you'll be much better off.
You were so right about that. You're right. You're definitely right. Now, Miss Louise, I want to get on yours too. You are correct about one thing. That Me Too movement, it changed a lot of things. It really did. Because back in the day, I'm gonna speak back in the 80s and before, and we can actually keep going up to probably early 2000s. Women was getting paid less. Also, at the same time, the opportunities was not there for females at the time. It doesn't even matter what race you were. If you was a female, you were taking back seat to a lot of things. So I'm glad that this movement happened because it's giving more opportunity for more females to do more things. Because to be truthful, females can do really anything a male can do. And it's been proven over and over again.
Right. It's like you kind of enter a world, like I entered the world of radio and I'm surrounded by disc jockeys, and you kind of go, oh, you know, you hear the way that they speak, and sometimes it's vulgar, and you say, okay, I roll with this and I got this, and, you know, and you just kind of take it, you know, you just kind of like keep moving forward, and you accept like, okay, when I was a kid, I ran with the boys. I played sports. I love guys, you know, and so you don't question their behavior. You just kind of roll with it, right? But then when it comes to sort of like positions of importance, and you notice yourself that being relocated, you know, that's when it's okay to say, I wonder if this is happening because I'm a female. Because I mean, I don't think you should question it all the time. Like, I think you should just put your head down and do a great job and be indispensable. That's what I tell young people, is like, make yourself indispensable. Like, do the thing that no one else feels like doing or that got neglected, you know, be that person. But if you notice that, okay, wait a second, somebody, you know, got promoted ahead of me, and now I have to teach this person that got promoted ahead of me how to do the thing that I should, you know, that's when it's time to sort of say, I'm wondering if that's because of my gender. And I think the Me Too movement, you know, in addition to sexual harassment, which of course is horrific, but in addition to that, I think it helped women like me just kind of like reassess what happened and why it happened, and you know, and what we could all do, you know, if we all work together, and if we're all aware of the challenges.
So right. You're so right about that.
You know, sometimes you have to really step out. I'll give you an example using stand-up. The comic Monique, who was hysterical,
Yes.
had to sue Netflix because the female comics that were getting specials on Netflix to stream were paid way below what the men were. Now, not everybody is worth a Dave Chappelle paycheck, but there should be more parity in that. And she had to get in a fight with him about it. And sometimes it's hard.
That's true.
You know,
That's very true. I mean, these are good examples right here. Very good examples. I mean, it's right in front of our face. Sometimes we can forget what we saw in the past. And when I say the past, it could be a year ago, or it could be 10 years ago, or 50 years ago. We can learn from the past of what happened and actually try to correct these mistakes. And that's why I think that we're on the movement of doing now, because females are having more opportunity for doing anything in any industry, to be true.
Well, I think the internet allows us to share stories and then say, oh, that happened to you? Like, oh, that also happened to you? Okay. You know, because you don't want to be a squeaky wheel. You don't want to be a person like, oh, you know, don't hire her. She's too militant and she'll just be difficult. Like also, it's just not my nature. But so you don't want to be that person necessarily. You want to be easy to work with, and you want to be someone that people look forward to seeing every day, because that's who we hire, right? We hire someone that we got to hang with, right?
That's true.
And, you know, but when you can look online and read other stories, it helps empower you.
So true.
Yeah.
You're right about that. Now, I do want to talk about another thing that both of you talking about, empowerment, because both of you all linked together and you all made this popular podcast that's called Media Path Podcast. You guys have brought on a lot of people. You all have talked about a lot of subjects. Tell me and tell the world right now, how did you all come together to connect up to make Media Path Podcast?
Weezy?
Well, we've been friends for a while, and Fritz was always contractually not permitted to have an opinion outside of, weather systems. So, and if you think about it, you don't want your weather guy like selling donuts, on TV. And it's just like, what? That you like that donut? Well, but you said it was going to rain, and I like this donut. So yeah, you got to keep them in their lane, right? And so when I've been doing, this is my 5th podcast actually, because ever since you could do podcasts, I've been doing podcasts. Like, so my first podcast was like the second, it became a word that people knew. I went to a comedian friend of mine named Laura Swisher, and I said, "Have you heard of podcasts?" And she's like, "I just heard about podcasts today." And I was like, "Let's do a podcast." So like, let's put on a show. And that was like, I don't know if that was 2005. I guess we have some of the videos on my YouTube channel. It was called Wheezy and the Swish. Her name's Laura Swisher, and my nickname's Wheezy.
Okay.
And then, one podcast led to the next podcast. And I was doing a podcast with kids, I was giving kids advice and had a panel of kids who would listen to someone's issue and then give this, fellow teenagers advice. So I'm working with a panel of children who are, it's very unreliable, as co-hosts. And I'm walking with my husband one day, and he's used to listening to me say, this one didn't show up, and this one had, that his mom grounded him, and the reasons for people not showing up are kind of like not something that a grown-up should have to contend with. There's enough unreliability in podcasting, right? So my husband said, like, well, if you could have the podcast of your dreams, what would it be? And I said, well, it would be with Fritz. And so Fritz and I went out to lunch or breakfast, and then he came back and said, yeah, no, I asked, and I'm not permitted to do it, but I'm going to retire in the next couple of years. So we just kind of looked forward to that moment when he would retire. And then I had to, it was during the pandemic, because I was doing another podcast, and I thought maybe I could do them both, but not during the pandemic over Zoom. It just became too tricky. So I had to tell my other podcasting co-hosts that I was going to have to call it quits on that show. That show was called Things I Found Online. Wow. And then I started podcasting with Fritz mid-pandemic, and we have just recorded episode 106 with Felix Cavallari from The Rascals, which was a favorite for Fritz. Yeah. He was excited to meet Felix.
And I'll tell you, Coop, what makes it work is we've been friends for a long time, and Wheezy, as we call her, and we've always seen eye to eye on stuff. We have similar opinions about pop culture, movies, books, TV shows, and we always had great conversations about them. And we thought that we ought to just translate these great conversations we have about this stuff to online. And it was just very natural. And it's just a continuation of what we had started years ago, which is talking about stuff we love.
That's what I'm talking about. That's where you can have something successful. If you're doing something that you love and you can't wait to do it again, that's success right in front of your face. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen worldwide, I will tell you this right now. I know a lot of people wants to come out there and just become famous and want to say, look at me, it's all about likes. It's all about likes. Do what you love and see what happens. I'm telling you, a door will open up to get you to somewhere else, still doing what you love. So continue to do everything. Exactly. Yes. Now, Ms. Louise and Fritz, you all have done, like you said, you've done a lot of shows. You have. Very successful. You're getting the followers on YouTube. Who are some of the people that you actually have interviewed that's been on your show?
Well, we'll pick a top. Let's see. I'll call up. I'll go to our website, because that would help me do my research on my own show, which is rather sad. Correct. Let's see. Media Path Podcast, is it? Yeah. Media Path Podcast. Let's see. Episodes. You have last week before Felix, we had kind of like not boomer, but like Gen X TikTokers. Okay. So we kind of like had TikTokers that are making it happen on TikTok, even, in their 40s and 50s. And so, that was kind of cool. We've had a lot of like former child stars. So we had Christopher Knight from the Brady Bunch. He played Peter Brady. We've had different political figures. We had Adam Schiff on our show, so that made me extremely nervous. And let's see, what's a highlight for you, Fritz?
Well, Henry Winkler, who's been on, he's
Yeah.
our only guest that's been on twice.
He's been on twice.
We had Marion Ross from Happy Days.
We've had a lot of people from Happy Days. We've had
Yeah.
Anson Williams. Who else?
We've had Gary Puckett. We had Bill Medley from the Righteous Brothers. We had we've had many stars, and I can't think of them out. You've got the list in front of you there, but
No,
Yeah, we had two of the brothers from My Three Sons. We had two Livingston brothers. I don't know. What do you like, Coop? Tell us what you like, and then we'll tell you. Do you like music, comedy?
Me, I'm music, television, movie, political. I'm all over the place, to be truthful. But you know what? Here's the deal. We're not going to spoil it for everybody. I want you to tell everyone how can they actually go watch the show.
there you go. Good job. Well, we have our own website, mediapathpodcast.com. We're on all the podcast services. It's also a YouTube show. Wheezy's a documentary filmmaker, so she post-produces these things and really makes them visually fun. So you can find them on our YouTube site. Give them a listen. I think you'll have fun. There's something for everybody there.
Yes.
And, yeah, we love to read celebrity biographies. So if someone's released a celebrity biography, we love to read their book and have them on the show. So you can listen to the audio version wherever you get your podcast, or you can go to YouTube where our podcast channel is called Media Path Podcast. And then I add all kinds of visual elements. Like right now, I'm working on the Felix Cavalieri episode from The Rascals. Okay. And he is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Ladies and gentlemen, worldwide, make sure you go watch the show. You want to make sure you keep up with Media Path Podcast. You never know who's going to appear up there next. You never know what topic is going to come up. You're looking for a bio for a celebrity, that's where you go to. Trust me, you can get so much information. You never know who's going to pop up on the show. Go make sure you like and subscribe. You want to keep up with it. Go to the website. Make sure you keep up with the website. You never know what Mr. Fritz and Miss Louise is going to do next on that show. So make sure you do check it out. Now, here's one thing I want to know. Is there any projects that you all are working on individually or collective together that you want the world to know about?
Yes, we have created a website called giftofdemocracy.com, where you can combine getting a gift for your loved one with saving democracy. So our site is sort of like a mall, kind of like board that shows you where to go to buy merchandise. So if whoever your favorite candidate, Mandela, go buy Mandela t-shirt. If you like Raphael, go buy Raphael, and then give that as a gift to your dad. And instead of something that he doesn't need, you could buy them merchandise from candidates who are saving democracy, or from causes that are saving democracy. And it's called giftofdemocracy.com. And that's our current passion project.
That's what I'm talking about. Make sure you check out the website. Don't go to it right now because you're still watching this interview. After the show, make sure you go check out the website. Christmas is coming up in a few months. I know somebody's birthday that's coming up soon. Somebody got born. Somebody was born.
We need to say that we don't make a dime off of the Coop. It's really just we link off to various political candidates, Val Demings, anybody who needs help, needs donations. We link you to their site and you buy a t-shirt from them or something. And that's how they make the money.
Val has some cool merch she has because she rides a motorcycle. So she's got some cool merch of her up riding her motorcycle. So
nice. Regardless if they make a dime or not, people, you go to their website. You make sure you do that. Now, Mr. Fritz, Miss Louise, is the last segment of the show. It's called Take the Floor. Both of you all will have up to 2 minutes to say whatever you want. No questions asked. Mr. Fritz, I'm going to start with you. Take the floor.
Okay, well, I think that a valuable contribution that podcasts make, and will even make more in the coming years, is a way for us to talk with one another and maybe ease the tensions we're having in the United States right now. It seems like people are getting twisted views of everything because they get all their news from various websites. And what we're doing is we're talking at people, but we're not talking with people. So something that I would wish for our podcast over the next couple of years is for us to gain credibility in the political world and have candidates on and have people on and discuss things in a calm and dispassionate way. And I think more conversations on a one-on-one basis will be what sort of takes the temperature down in the United States. I'm really worried about where we are right now. And I think conversation and understanding and listening is one of the tools we can use to settle that quite a bit. So if you ask me what I wish for the next couple of years, it would be that.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. I like that. Miss Louise, take the floor.
Well, we like to think of our audience as woke boomers. And so most woke boomers are paying attention and they're going to vote. You're going to vote. But you know young people. And I think it's important when you're talking to a young person who's checking out your groceries, you know, to just say, are you planning to vote? Do you have a plan to vote? And let's just not assume that just you're voting and so we're good. Like you could ask 10 people in the next 2 months, do you have a plan to vote? And if they don't have a plan to vote, then you get their information. What's your zip code? You know, get their phone number, go home and Google it and send them the information that they need. A lot of people just don't vote because the day goes by and they didn't vote. And this cycle, I think people feel like there's more of a vested interest since we've had, you know, women's rights have been taken away and there's more of a personal vested interest. But we all need to vote whether it affects you or not, because it affects the world, it affects the country, it affects the world, it affects the planet, which ultimately affects you. So even if you're going to look at it selfishly, which I beg you not to, because life is more interesting when you're less selfish. But even if you're going to look at it selfishly, voting does affect you. And it will eventually affect you when no one can do anything. And if we have to live in a police state at some point. I haven't asked you about your politics, Coop, so I hope I'm not speaking on your show in a way that's uncomfortable. But yeah, I just think that we can all ask somebody, what's your plan to vote? And can I help you get there?
That's what I'm talking about. Everybody, November's coming around the corner. You know what to do. Go out there and vote. Make sure you do it. Now, I want to say this, Mr. Fritz, Miss Louise, thank you very much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure, and I would love to have both of you back on in the future.
Well, you do a great job, Coop. You got a great personality. You ask a lot of good questions. It was fun being on.
Thank you.
Yes, you are excellent at this. Keep doing it. This is what you're meant to do.
Thank you very much. All right, people, make sure you catch the next episode of Big Scoop with Coop. My next guest is... Come on, people. You know I don't announce my next guest. You got to stay tuned. Go to the website. You got to make sure you keep up with me. So until next time on the Big Scoop with Coop.